Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Incarceration to Incorporate tonight. Thank you. We got a great show on tonight. We have Julius Campbell, we have Ariel Felton, and we have Martina. Tonight, we're asking a question. Is education a remedy to incarceration? Now, Miko, go ahead.
What up? What up? I am so proud of you. You did an excellent job. Ladies, what's going on? How you doing? Those of you that are watching us as well, who are we? As she says so eloquently, incarceration to incorporation. And what are we? We provide a platform for returning citizens. Why? Because so often those that are returning home feel that they're in this thing alone. And we want to change that narrative. We want people to know that there are countless men and women returning home from prison doing well. They are not repeating. They are not building the recidivist rate. They are successful either in business, successful in their organization, successful in their relationship, successful all the way around. And that's what we do. We provide this platform for returning citizens, for relatives of returning citizens, and also for the resources for returning citizens. And so we thank Julius Hall for being a part of this, giving us this platform. We also thank AB for having the brainchild for this idea that men and women can come on and tell the world that we are doing good. No more are we allowing the narrative to be hijacked, saying that we are coming right back to prison. That is different. However, tonight we want to speak primarily about our young people. We've been talking about our older people returning citizens, but now we realize that a lot of young men and women are moving from school to juvenile to jail. Many of you have heard, as we spoke on last week, about that school to prison pipeline. Well, what we are doing tonight, we are trying to find a remedy that will hinder, halt, and stop that increase of our young people going to prison. And so without further ado, we are going to introduce the ladies that are on. They're going to tell us who they are, because they are part two. They are the frontline resources to what we're doing. Education is a remedy to incarceration. So first, we're going to allow Martina to tell us who she is, and basically just a little icebreaker about what she does, and then we will allow Ariel to come on, tell us who she is, and a little icebreaker about what she does. And then I know these ladies are going to take over. So go ahead, Martina.
Well, thank you, Julius, and thank you for Marie for having us on. My name is Martina Yvette. I am the youth community organizer for the Deep Center. I work in connection with young people between the ages of 17 through 26 on policy and advocacy work. Incarceration is one of those major items of reform work that we're heavily working on. And reason for that being is because a number of our young people are those who have been incarcerated or near incarceration. And we say near incarceration because we want to be able to be that prevention measure for them so that they will not have to experience that. But for the most part, I'm grateful for my work. I got involved with my work because of my own youth that is focused in, I had a pretty much a center, sort of like the Deep Center when I was younger, that helped me and molded me, and also allowed me the opportunity to understand how to um, take advantage of my talents as opposed to taking advantage of the anger that I had pent up, where I too was in a place where I was just a unhappy young person. So just moving from that end of the spectrum and knowing that I was capable of making my own choices, and that there were people standing behind me. I had that village mentality, and I just wanted to be able to give all of that back. So just having that reinforcement. So thank y'all again for having me on. I'll pass it to Ariel.
Thanks, Martina. I'm Ariel Felton. I am a director of youth programs at Deep Center. So what that means is I sort of supervise a few of our youth programs that go either into the middle schools and have creative writing workshops with young people, or they take our high schoolers outside of the four walls of a traditional learning institution and get them looking into their own communities and using art, writing, poetry, creative expression to sort of talk about what they see, right, in their communities and in their worlds, all the way to what we're going to talk about today, working with systems involved youth and rep, which is how I know Julius. He is an awesome life navigator for our young men in our rep program at Deep Center. As for my own background, I think for me, growing up, I just saw a lot of young people around me falling into certain pit holes or pitfalls, as they say. And I'm actually, Martina, I think that's great that you had like a Deep Center where when you were growing up, because I really wish that I did. I really wish that my community did at the time. And I think that's kind of what brought me to Deep. I've always been a writer, first and foremost, as how I express myself the most, what feels the most true to me. And I've always believed in the power of creative expression and mentorship to sort of steer our young people in the right direction, help like re-navigate or re-guide them to success, right? We all want to see our young people really, really thrive. So I think that's kind of where my passion comes from. And thank you guys again for having me. I'm excited to get this discussion started.
Take over, Marie.
I knew you was going to say that. I knew you was going to say that. So Ariel and Martina, what was what made it different for you all not to fall in the pattern of ever going to juvenile or to being a trouble kid?
Do you want to start, Martina? I don't want to.
I'll let you go ahead and answer that. Thought process.
For me, I would say I had a very, very strong and present village. If you were talking to the 15-year-old Ariel, the way she would have phrased that would be, my mother doesn't leave me alone. My mother makes sure that my homework is done. My dad makes sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Like, the village is really, really strong.
Right.
And so I wasn't ever looking to other places for that sort of like community that I found at home. I had a really strong guiding force growing up. Even though I didn't have a Deep Center, my family is super tight knit, and that's one thing I noticed working with young people who like just don't have the village that I had growing up. We talk a lot about the different village members in a young person's life, and that's not just family at home. That is, what role is the teacher playing? What role is the guidance counselor playing? What role are the parents playing, or cousins, or friends, or music teachers, whatever? I think this is hopefully not too cliche, but it really does take a village to.
It really, really does.
A young person.
Martina?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Ariel. It was necessarily my village. My parents, and I grew up in a grandparent household. So my grandparents were my parents. Even though mom was present, my grandparents were there majority of the time. And so they made sure that, I had everything that I needed or wanted. But I will say, because they weren't my parents, I also grew up mostly with my friends. So my friends started to become this certain part of the village too. And even though some of my friends were not they were not the cleanest of friends. They weren't the ones that you want your kids hanging out with all the time. But even though they did the things that some led to some of their incarcerations as well, they saw something in me, and they basically were just like, they were actually my redirection force. They were like, don't travel down this path I'm going down. You got all these different avenues ahead of you. Make the best decisions, and don't follow behind us. This is just what we have to do. So I think the fact that I was able to learn from two different sides of the coin, and the fact that I was able to be raised in a mentality where my village was so strong. They were adamant about me being able to succeed, and I think that even today that rings true for a number of our young people. I just had a plethora of love, and that's honestly what helped me through was love.
Oh, that's Miko. Kelly is here now. How you doing, Kelly?
Good evening, everyone.
Okay.
I'm glad that you are here. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself, Kelly, and tell us a little about yourself?
My name is Kelly Golson. I am new to the Deep Center. Actually, probably only like a month and a half.
Mhm,
I am a ex-educator, formerly slash social worker.
mhm,
I worked in education in New Jersey for about 6 years, and Texas for about a year. I always worked in urban communities. Um, my background formally is in criminal justice and sociology. So I was a corrections officer. I was a social worker in minimum, medium, and maximum security facilities in Newark, New Jersey, and at Rikers Island in New York. Um, my most recent position was working with Rikers in the youth.
Uh-oh.
Think her sound went out.
yeah, I can't hear.
Oh, say something, Kelly. No, I thought I heard her, but no.
Okay, can everybody still hear me?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
we hear you
Yeah,
now.
you
Okay,
know.
so yeah, my most recent position before I got into education, formerly I was working at Rikers Island in their youth division as a community coordinator. Mayor De Blasio hired 20 clinician social workers to work directly with the 16 to 20-year-old boys at RNDC, and I forget the other name of the facility. And I also worked with the women, and we were designed to go inside and work directly in the housing areas, doing
Mhm,
life skills, all the things that they needed that they were not getting, I guess, in the community.
mhm.
Ironically, they got them incarcerated. So, yeah, and then I transferred into education, and I transferred into education because I started noticing like a huge pattern. A lot of the boys could not read, they could not write. So I took my talents into education, and a lot of things went full circle. So a lot of the people, when I was working as a social worker in those very jails in Newark, New Jersey, I actually ended up teaching their children in the schools. So
Wow.
a lot of things went full circle for me. And I have been deeply like passionate about um, restorative work, just noticing a lot of patterns. And even though I'm from New Jersey and I've worked in Texas and now I'm here in Georgia, a lot of it all still looks very much the same. And I'm just really deeply ingrained in doing the work with those populations of people, and also still being like in policy for education.
So, what made it your passion, Kelly? Why
Um,
did
what part? I'm sorry.
what made it your passion? What made you go from education to the criminal justice system? Where did that passion come from?
So I started out in criminal justice, and when I started out in criminal justice, I started noticing I just didn't like these sentiments around seeing black and brown people incarcerated. I didn't like
She stopped there for a minute. I think she's driving, so I believe she may have hit an area that,
Okay.
yeah. So she's driving. Uh,
I didn't like seeing, sorry, my connection is weird in the house. I didn't like seeing so many black and brown people incarcerated. And I also didn't like how sometimes there were policies and procedures that were happening that integrally I just didn't like, uh, just doing a lot of things and paperwork that they wanted you to sign off on, and it just wasn't right. and it just didn't sit well with my spirit.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
When you say sign off on, what do you mean by that?
So essentially, the inmates, if there was, I guess, like a fight or a brawl or anything that happened in the facility, how they
Mm-hmm.
had to use like excessive use of force.
Mm-hmm.
I was working on what they call CERT teams. So I was a part of a team that had to go in and do quote unquote shakedowns. And
Right.
they would go in and they would, shake the rooms down and take all their things and throw it in the trash, or completely like discombobulate their rooms and basically write a report and saying that it was, contraband. And it was like
Right.
pictures. It was their food, and it was things like that, or them using excessive use of force and assaulting inmates, and then you have to go to court and testify. Just a lot of things that
You didn't agree with?
I didn't agree with, and I just felt like I was coming to work doing a lot of counsel, doing a lot of therapy, and there's a code when you work in those facilities, and they don't like that.
Right.
They don't like when you're too invested in things like that. And so I felt, though, my my skill set and my heart would be better positioned in the other side of that. And that's when I started working at halfway houses, um, and doing more of that work and doing more workshops and lectures, along Newark and Jersey City. And then I transferred into education because I
Mm-hmm.
noticed then there the men still did not even know how to read their dispositions. They didn't even know why they were even incarcerated in the first place. They didn't know that their bail was only $500. They were sitting for months and months and months for pretrial and didn't even have the money to bail out. Some of them, if it's $500 and it's a 10%, they could get out.
Right.
Bail bondsmen, the system is just crooked.
So I want to ask a question now to each one of you.
I like
But
to.
first of all, while I'm asking this question, Shakita, how you doing? We're glad that you're always a faithful help. Good evening to you and your family. Donnie Black, he asked a question. Donnie Black says education is an important remedy. And also Trayvon Jones is watching with us as well. And I know that Tisha out of Las Vegas is also coming on with us. But I want to ask you three a question. Since we are looking at this from three perspectives, all three of you have passions for helping our young people. My question to you is, what can we do practically? Because I know we did a lot of talking and we're coming at this from a lot of different perspectives. So number one, what can we do practically to help? And number two, what are you doing intentionally to bring that to pass? So we'll start with you, Ariel, then we'll work our way to you, Martina, and then you, Kelly.
Okay, so what can we do? And when you say practical, do you mean like resources, like actual things that we can put into place to help young people?
Yes.
Well, we've already kind of talked about how important it is to have a village that believes in a young person and hasn't already given them some, terrible narrative or or some stereotype that they just believe that this young person is destined to end up this way. I really do believe having adults who believe in you and who are listening to you can change like the course of a young person's life. Secondly, I think that there's so many like resources that I think we don't even think of being kind of like pitfalls to incarceration, right? There are tough choices that people have to make when they do not have jobs, when they are not sure where their next meal is going to come from, when you are a young person and you have to help pay bills because mom's job is not helping to pay the bills. There is obviously, education is extremely important. I know we'll get more into that later, but I think it is a really important slice of the pie of the resources that we give young people, because once you have education opens up so many doors, right? You just have more options in your life once you have that education under your belt. And I think we've probably started to think of that education as looking one type of way, like you have to graduate and have to go to college. But there are so many young people in Deep who are learning skills that like are going to take them so far, that don't have anything to do with, you know, having a college degree. Anything from being an artist to being a hair braider, a not cosmopolitan, a cosmetologist. These young people are talented. These young people have interests that I think will take them really far, if only the adults around them are taking their passions as seriously as they want to. I think as far as my role, especially at Deep, that's kind of what a director of youth programs does, right? I talked about the 3 programs that I kind of supervise right now, and each of those gives our young person, gives young people something, whether it's a creative outlet or a mentor that they can turn to, or just like a safe space to be themselves if home isn't that safe space. Again, in the rep program, especially, our life navigators are there with our young boys all day, helping them finish schoolwork, helping them make, you know, correct life decisions, helping them or showing them other options, taking them to Savannah Tech and saying, okay, so you're not into school, but like, look at this quick degree you could get and then have a job like that. So you don't like college? That's fine. College isn't for everybody, but here are these other options. And I just think it's super important to have mentors who have been there and who know what they're talking about and who have shared life experiences. It's hard to try to learn from someone who hasn't been in your shoes. So yeah, I feel like I talked a lot, so I'll pass it over to Martina.
I think you did a wonderful job, and you hit so many things on the head as well, Ariel. I think that when we talk about the resources the young people need, we take it from a place of resources that either we needed ourselves or resources that we feel that they need, and the biggest resource is those young people. I think the most important thing that we can do is always ask those young people, hey, how can we be of assistance to you? Because we think that we know their needs, and sometimes it can also be along the lines that those young people have other needs that we didn't even identify yet. So aside from the other things that Ariel did mention that we do a great job of at Deep and that she's been doing as a youth director, Ariel has made a tremendous movement within our young people. And so, you know, I'm proud to say that we work hand in hand together with that. But I will say, as far as one of the resources we rarely think about as well on my side, what we're trying to do is also educate those young people on those policies. So Kelly really hit it on the head earlier when she mentioned how young people sometimes get incarcerated, or even adults get incarcerated. They don't even know what they're incarcerated for. They don't even know how much money it takes to get out of prison. They don't know how much money it takes to get out of jail. Their families aren't educated on this either. All they know is that they have been indicted on a crime and that now they have to serve time. And unfortunately, the prison system in itself is a money system. It's not necessarily based upon the crime that you did. I mean, you can honestly rob a bank, and if you got enough money to get you out, you'll get out. So it's more so on the lines of making sure that we do educate and understand. This is the reason why there is cash bails and bonds in place. This is the reason why the system is designed so that you as a person are not able to receive a lawyer except when it's pro bono. So these are the reasons why we want to be able to have those conversations and give those resources to our young people, aside from just, you know, food services and things of that nature too. We want you to be able to be literate in the law yourself, so that if anything is to arise, you're able to say, well, I know how to take care of myself, and this is how I'm able to get out of this situation as well.
Okay. I know Kelly is
She's back, Miko.
okay. Kelly, can you speak to us so we can hear you? Yeah, she texted me a little note that says she may be having bad connections. So while we're waiting on her to come in, I want you now to speak, because on December the 1st, and Marie will speak more to this as we continue on December the 1st, OAA Savannah, Offender Alumni Association. And what do we do, Marie?
We encourage, educate, and empower.
Boy, she's doing a wonderful job. All right. What we're doing on December the 1st is we are having a youth forum, if you will.
Can I speak about that?
You can, but let me just say this once.
Yes, sir.
Martina said that we need to hear from the young people themselves, and that's what we are going to do on December the 1st. We will make sure that we get that information and message out, but this is a precursor, if you will, to what we are going to speak on that day. You may go, Marie.
Yes. Hey, Martina. Ariel, I wanted to know, because I know Martina said that she took in son, I guess for you to give approval for the kids to come to the meeting that's going to be on December the 1st is strictly for them. OAA, we usually deal with the adults, but I have a passion for kids because I love the fact that both of you all say that it takes a village, because I have a lot of children, you understand, and I need a village to help me with the village that I have with my children. Okay. So and I just think that it would be a wonderful idea. I have the president from 100 Black Men. He's going to be there. Brad and also Justin is going to be there. And I want them to speak to them. And I spoke to both of them again today. And they said they're going to make it a top priority to be there, because go ahead, Miko.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I thought you read. And so I think that it's just my opinion, but I really think I would love to hear what some of the young men that would speak. I would really love to hear what are their concerns. Like, why are they the way that they are? What will make them go and be a member to a gang? I just want to hear the input, and I want us to really listen. I don't want us to, I want city officials to be there. Just as I told Julius, I really want to hear from the kids. I really want to know why, and what's their reason. And then when they tell their reason, don't lash out at them. Let them be free to be open, to say what it is, how the way they feel, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I totally honor what Martina said, because I feel like so often, adults need to remember that, yes, we grew up. Yes, we were 14 and 15 and 16 at some point, but we don't know what it's like to be that age right now, going through the individual struggles of our young people. So yeah, I think that the opportunity is going to be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, Ariel, I spoke to a young man today, and the question I asked him, I say, do you believe that education is a remedy to incarceration? And he said, Marie, you have to think, well, he's not a young man, he's a grown man, but I know that he just did 12 years in prison. He just came home. He said, Marie, you can have education, but if you're in the wrong community, it can still mess you up. You know what I'm saying? It takes a village. It does take a village, but if you are dealing with a lot, like you had loving parents, Ariel, and Martina had a loving grandparents who saw and made sure. But what about the parent who has to work 2 and 3 jobs and who is not asking if homework is done because she's tired, because she's doing it by herself? So what do you do then? So when a child have leadway, when they can go out and do what it is, because when you're a child, you're not looking at, well, mama got to work 2 jobs to provide. You're looking at, I'm all alone. I ain't got nobody. I don't have anyone who's asking me, is my homework done? Or helping me with my homework. So how do you speak to a child in that part area, Martina, who don't have that village, who's alone, who half of the time don't have food to eat? Yes, I understand they come to the DEEP program and you all try to do the best you can with them. But if they're saying, you know what, yeah, I understand that you're giving this, but they still have to go back to their community. So what do you say to that child?
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. I think also that involves the history of why gangs were created. Gangs were created as a civilization force. They were created as a family. The Crips, for example, when they started out in East California, was created because there was a factory that closed the majority of the people in that area that were Black and brown worked at. And so they formed this coalition called the Crips that soon turned into gun violence because it became a better resource to sell drugs than it was to actually be able to put into it the way that they wanted to as the first formation, which was being like a catalyst under the Black Panther Party. So when we think about how gangs formulate and why they're important to certain communities, we have to put into play that sometimes it's more so gangs are their own resource. The things that we cannot provide, the gang can. And so we have to think of it from a way of not um, intimidation practices when it comes to gang violence, but ways that centralizing what the concept of a gang means. What is it that we don't have in certain organizations that we need to bring into those matters to our organization? So rather that mean like a development of different food sources to combat these deserts, or if it's along the lines of actually giving our young people leadership roles. The importance of this youth community advising board that I handle is because we're not really looking to be the resource for our young people. I mean, I can talk all day and I love to talk, and we all know this. But for the most part, I do feel as if I have the privilege of having a voice, but I know that I have this privilege and I'd rather give it to a young person because I cannot solve anyone's problem. That's not my job. My job is to help raise those issues so that they can solve their own problems.
Now, listen,
Because,
I want to cut you off for just a
yeah,
minute
go
because
right ahead.
I want. I think we sometimes think that people understand our terminology. So
Mhm,
when we use the word village, I
mhm.
want you and Ariel, to clarify what does that mean. The village. It takes a village to raise children, if you will. And as you're also speaking to the village aspect, I also want you to be objective because there are a lot of young people receiving help,
Right.
education, information, occupation, but they are choosing not to utilize it. How you doing, Tisha Fulton? We're glad that you're watching. What do you do, or how do you reach those that are difficult to reach? So that's for both of you. What is the village? Correct that terminology or
Sure.
explain it. And then what do you do when you have met those needs but is being rebuffed at?
Right. So when we talk about a village, essentially we're talking about a community, a group of people that live in close proximity to each other, that can be a resource. So that's as easy as me asking you, Julius, for a cup of sugar for my Kool-Aid. That's basically what a village is. So when we talk about that, it's more so on the lines of like us building a rapport or trust between bounds of our young people. Deep is a village because we actually go into the school systems majority of the time, or we know a friend or we know somebody that's just like, hey, my young person is interested in writing. And so they become a part of our deep village because we cultivate together as a group of writers. That's pretty much who we are. So when we talk about that, that's what we say as a village. In terms of a village mentality, that's a whole different story because what that would mean is having the idea that we are like-minded folks. Like for instance, all four of us would be a village mentality because we know that we want to help our young people. We may not be in close proximity to one another, but we do know that we have the avenue to help one another and we want to help one another. So for our young people, like you said, they do have the resources sometimes, but also how available are those resources and who are they available to? And if they are available, why aren't they being accessed? That's a good question. And that's something that we need to ask the young people. If I give you the opportunity to play basketball and you've been trying to be a point guard since you were in sixth grade, why aren't you using that advantage? You know, and that's more so along the lines of like, why am I not asking these important questions to that young person to see why they haven't developed their skills? Maybe it's a person within that alliance that they don't agree with. Maybe it's more so on the lines of like, they like Ariel hit it on the head. Maybe mom and dad are working two jobs, two or three jobs, and they don't have time to come to practice. You know, and it's more so the lines of like, what can I do to help you get to your goal? Because I can't help you unless you help me. So, and that doesn't just go for our young people, that also goes for their parents. And I'll be real with you, there are certain times we come into play with parents that also do not want kids to um basically tell their business. I feel like I heard that a lot when I was a child. Like, don't go out the house telling our business.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like when you hear certain things like that, and even chastising someone else's child, when you see that the child is doing wrong, I mean, that parent can sometimes get a little, a little drunk with their power, and they may go off on you for correcting something that may need it to be corrected. And so I think it's more so the lines of like defining what that means as far as who needs to be a part of the village too. Because I'll be honest with you, Noah didn't bring everybody on that ark, right?
No,
So,
he didn't.
so I mean, there are certain times that we kind of have to strip the bubble, and we have to realize, like, okay, what's important and who's important to this process, and how can we take pieces of that process to generate to other people without having to burden them with the opportunity of doing things overly zealous of what they're capable of doing too. So that's just ways that we can as a community just formulate and help one another as well, because not everybody's going to get the resource, and you know what, that's okay. I want you to reap the benefits of mine, and
Ariel,
that you have to have that.
come on with it, Ariel.
Yeah, that was great, Martina. I'll just piggyback a little bit off of what she said, especially thinking about the village. I think it's important to remember that like one person can't be everything for a young person or for anybody really. People need multiple folks in their village holding out their hands, introducing them to resources and kind of helping guide their way. So I think it's really important to think of this idea of a village as like a chain of links that are like interconnected. Even if, let's say I know a young person who needs something, and this young person doesn't know Martina, but Martina is in my village, and I can say, Martina, I have this young person who really needs access to tutoring in this subject, and I can't, but mom can't pay. What do we do? And Martina might know someone else in her village who offers discounts for tutoring or does free tutoring. And so I think it's good to think about a village as like a village is a group of people, a formed, chosen family inside of a larger community. So I just think it's important to realize like how interconnected that can look like. And to answer your other question about kind of what do you do if a young person doesn't seem to be accepting the help or using the resources that we bring, that's tough. I think that is a really tough question. I think one thing that I really love about Deep is that we try to encourage and empower young people and help them realize that like they are the catalyst for change in their own lives. There's always going to be stuff that we can't change that's without beyond our control, I'll say. But I think that what a mentor can do for a young person is really show them how little actions and little steps that they take can really change their lives. I can't say, how often I'll hear from a young person like, oh, what does it matter if I try this? It's not going to help. Especially for Black and Brown youth, especially for youth who have maybe seen this in their family before. I've certainly heard young Black men say like, well, you know how the country is set up, like I know where I'm going to end up. They're really like buying into that narrative that they're hearing from society. And I think that the thing that Deep does through creative expression and education is remind young people that like you don't have to be that. You really do not have to follow this like prescribed path that's out there. And of course it's tough. Of course young people push back. Of course they do. It happens all the time. But I think consistency is really key. It can be really heartbreaking sometimes to do the sort of work that we do, especially when you love our young people so much. But I think that quite often folks, or young people especially, like they notice when adults give up. They really, really do. And you can put all the textbooks in the world in front of that young person, but like if they really and truly don't believe that there is a reason, that there's a purpose, that there's going to be something positive to come out of it because you don't believe in them, I really don't think it's gonna change anything. So
Wow. I remember Martina said the other night, She said that the resources, they were talking about the resources back when you were younger, and you seen that it didn't do it. It hasn't went anywhere. Like they haven't did anything. So we're now is what we're not. It's 2021, and we're still talking about resources and what are they going to do about it? To help the youth. And one thing, Miko is objective of this because I come off really strong when it comes to the youth, right? And because it's not that he don't want what I want, it's not that he doesn't, but he feels that I'm just like, okay, we done talked about this one, two, three, four times. Now I'm tired of talking about the same thing. Now, what are we going to do? So if Martina being the age that she is, and they've been talking about it back then, and nothing has been done, and we're in 2021, and we're still talking about it, and we're asking it to be done. Okay, so what we supposed to, how long do you want me to be nice, Julius?
Wow. Okay. Well, while I'm thinking about the answer to that question, Beverly Manning came on. Beverly Manning says we can answer this question. She's basically agreeing with what you ladies have said about the village. She says we have to sometimes take on the whole family to reach one child. What is that? What do you mean? Well, I know what she means, but speak towards that while I think of an answer for Marie. And thank you, Beverly, for coming on. She says, action. We have to sometimes take on the whole family to reach one child. Speak to that, Ariel.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I think that goes back to this village mentality, right? You cannot just help a young person without understanding where they come from and how far those needs reach. You could be trying to educate a young person all day and realize the reason that he's not paying attention is because he didn't have breakfast. And the reason he didn't have breakfast was because mom doesn't have a job. So now you have to reach further back and like set up a foundation and like structures that will actually support our young people. I mean, there's always going to be stuff that we can't, just throw a resource at. Systemic racism, it's a thing, it's here. We're dealing with it every day, and there's not like, oh, I can just give you some money to deal with that issue. But I really do think if you look at everything a young person is going through and everyone who's in their village and how to support them holistically, that it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Oh, I like that. Shakita has something that she wants to say to Martina. She says, sometimes when speaking about a certain thing, we must take on a bit of an authoritative stance. Now, I like that. Let me say it again. Sometimes when speaking about a certain thing, we must take on a bit of an authoritative stance. Oh, my goodness. Tisha Fulton says, Maria, you can continue to be nice and just push strong and hard for what you need and believe it, because the harder you push, the greater the power. Thank you, Tisha, for helping me to answer Marie's question, because I was thinking at the same time. But Martina, you heard what Chiquita said. Taking on a bit of an authoritative stance. You want to speak towards that?
Yeah. So Chiquita, thank you again. Also, all things relevant media. I want to push on both of those questions about nothing being done but changing the methods. So authoritative stances. To be honest, is how we use our authority. What does that power look like, and how is that power not necessarily diminishing our young people or their families, but it's allowing them the opportunity to have that power. So we go through different teaching models. One of mine is basically being a warm demeanor. So what that means is basically I come in as a avenue and resource for the child. So what that may look like is me basically being like, hey, like, I know you were sleeping today in workshop, but I'm gonna let you sleep. But tomorrow when you come in, can we get a little bit of writing done? It's basically giving them the opportunity to feel how they feel and sit in that. Because I always tell my kids, sit in your funk. You sad today? We just gonna sit in it. Let's be sad together, and then we'll get done with it. And then if you feel like you want to talk about it, write it down, draw a picture, or tell me after class. I don't care what you do. If you don't want to talk about, we don't have to talk about it today. We'll just sweep it under the bridge. But I'm going to continue to come in, and I'm going to continue to reinforce, like, hey, today you have the power, and I'm going to give you that authority. But like you said, we don't want our kids also to just, like, do whatever they want to do. We don't do that, but we do give them the opportunity to express themselves, and to sit with themselves, because they're going through some of the same issues you're going through. And I think that sometimes we get too far away from that too. To answer Black media relevant, you're right. Our methods do need to change. And that's why it's important that we place the power back in the young people's hands. The reason I made that comment, thank you, Miss Marie, is because when I was younger, we did have a coalition that was made up of young people. I want to say it was over 200 young people in the city that I identified as either low income or people that were actually pretty astounding in school. So it was a mixture of a group. And so what they did was they actually asked us, what is it that you want to see in that community? What will make you want to prosper? And of course, we said things like, oh, I want to be a chef. I want to, go into a beautician school, cosmetology school, things that relevance. And, when you're younger, people are listening, but sometimes it's not necessarily that they're going to proceed with the work as of then. And so for me, it's more so the lines of I'll talk about money because I feel like we have to talk about money. We push money as an issue, and it means all for the opportunity to enrich communities. And we give these communities money, and then they don't know what to do with the money. So it's more so us being a resource. Like, how do we teach our communities that this is how you use the money? This is how you set goals. This is how you set a budget for your family. This is how you are able to take your kids to school in the morning and be able to work 2 to 3 jobs. These are babysitters. These are resources. These are the ways that we implement change, because we can't throw money at a problem without teaching people how to use that resource either. So I'm going to stop talking there, but thank you.
Okay, Martina. Okay, Martina, I'm going to use me. So you talking to me. Okay, Martina, I'm just saying, for example, you know how many children I have, right? So, okay, so I got $600 a month. Now I want you say you got to teach people how to budget, right? Now I'm working 2 jobs, right? So you tell me how I get the 5 babies up. I got to get them back and forth to school. And now I'm working a job from 7 to 3. Then when I get off from that job, I'm going straight to the next job. So in between, they're not going to see me. So tell me what you would say to me. What would you say to me? I'm coming to you for help. I need your help, Martina. I need you to help me with my children. I have an autistic son, and then I have my baby girl. She's in middle school. I have 2 in middle school and one in high school. Plus my autistic son, he's in high school also. So tell me, how would you help me?
And that's a good question to ask me. So here's what I'm first going to do. We are just 2 people, right? Only 2 adults in this room. I'm going to enlist the people that I know that work in these services. You got an autistic son? Okay. I actually know a doctor that works with people who have autism, and I know a resource for that. I will get somebody to help you. Your daughter is in high school. You have kids. Now, as me, and this is just personal, this is not deep. I honestly feel like young people need the opportunity to be young people. So I don't feel as if anybody needs to be helping to raise siblings. They're raising themselves right now.
Right.
You are raising them. So they're learning who they are. Okay. So your young person's in high school. What's the young person interested in? Maybe they need to be in that after school program, something that takes a little bit more time. So when you have that break, where you're working, you're like, oh, I had to get to my second job. You could go pick that young person up, and they could come back to the house while we worry about what the other young people are doing. But that's the thing. I understand, and I don't place too much emphasis on myself or you. I feel like you are one person. I am one person. But together, if I know people that's able to help you, I'm going to stand in those corners to get someone to be that resource for you, because that's how we give back to each other. It does not work in a silo. It works when it's a community.
That's
And
right.
Oh,
that's
I love that. I love how you answer that. Now, I want to jump in. I want to say one thing, but then I got to also play the devil's advocate. But let me give you an opportunity right now to answer this. Ariel, you can help us out first. What are some other resources? She's a single parent mother, and you heard the different spectrum that she's on. What are some resources? Because there are a lot of parents that don't know about these resources. So what are some resources, some avenues that we can share with our listeners that you, Ariel, may know about, and also that you, Martina, may know about? Give us some resources.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, working for Deep, the first thing I'm going to say is that if you need a place for your young person after school, come to us. We will write with them. We will do art with them. We are watching them for you until a certain amount of time, right? That you do have to come pick them up at a certain time. And then I'd start with, gosh, so there's so many like food resources that I feel like I'm right now learning about as we think about the upcoming holidays and families who, are looking at Thanksgiving and Christmas and wanting to make a big, beautiful meal and not sure how they're going to make it happen. So I was just introduced to the Second Harvest and their food bank and how nonprofits can go in and kind of use these resources. I mean, just baskets of food down to diapers, down to hygiene products, and kind of gather those and set up their own, if you call it like pantries, and like stock and help their communities, help the folks that are coming to their nonprofit. When the pandemic happened, this is a thing that I love about Deep is everything we do is so holistic. When the pandemic first happened and everyone was going virtual, one of the first things that we did as an organization was pull together a huge document that was just links to everything you could possibly need, that took care of the whole family, right? I'm not just talking about here's how to make sure that your young person doesn't fall off in math. I'm talking about here's rental assistance. Here is how you find a job. Here is folks in the community who are donating laptops. Now that your young person does have to be, using or going to school virtually. I think, again, leaning on one another is one of the most important things that we can do. Just because one person doesn't have an answer does not mean that they can't help you find it. I won't remember every resource in that document, but our Deep's COVID response resource document is available to everyone. It's just a link on our website, and it's all local stuff, right? It's here in Chatham County stuff that can really help the whole family.
Martina, you answer the same question, but before you do, one of the writers says these resources could be provided to the schools, social services, social workers, and guidance counselors to provide to the parents. Go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. And to be honest with you, again, Deep is such a great resource. I know Ariel does this often. And when I was working in programming with the young people for Deep, I also did this. But we are in contact with your social workers and guidance counselors at school. So if we don't have a resource or they have a resource that we don't have, we will work in combination with them. So we work hand in hand. I will say, for the most part, because we are working in tandem with the school systems. A normal amount of the resources we get are hand in hand with that school. So again, I would like to reference again Ariel's plea of the COVID resource. We do have that rental service assistance, things of that nature. For my side, because I do work primarily with educational resources and advocacy work, I would like to give a shout out in there on your ticker. APRI is a great resource for us. The A. Philip Randolph Institute is another organization we do work hand in hand with. They do provide resources for young people to get jobs. We are very well connected with medical professionals. I have a really good relationship with the St. Joseph Candler African American Institute of Health Services Centers. So if you're looking for anything in regards to health education for your young people, that's also a good resource. And then just another one would be, even we connect heavily with the higher institutes. So Savannah State and Georgia Southern, we do work hand in hand with their counselors, criminal justice departments, things of that nature as well. And I will be completely honest with you. everyone here that works for Deep, we're what you call the pull-uppers. We will pull up. If we don't have a resource, we will find it. If you tell us it's something we don't have, we are going to go straight to that building and be like, hey, I have this, and this is what I need help with, and we'll find it for you. Because that's just what it takes. It takes us being able to be in that connection with that person, so that we can advocate and be of resources. Also, if it's something related, in which I feel like we haven't talked a lot about, is abuse services or prevention, things of that nature. We are very well connected to that as well. So again, I think somebody hit it dead on the nail. Like, we have to be an advocate, not just for the child, but for the family.
Oh man! So we are getting ready, ladies. We're at the end, and we want to give you an opportunity to speak to our audience. We have those that are on. There are some teachers that are listening to what you're saying that are really giving it their all, and
Mhm.
sometimes it feels like their work is in vain because once they leave once the children leave the school, they're going back to an unstable environment, and so I want you to encourage the audience, the community of teachers that are here. But I also want you to speak this last few moments, both of you, encourage, or this is your platform to say what's on your heart as it relates to your resources, words of encouragement to whoever you feel that you would like to speak to. So first, I'm going to start with Ariel. Ariel, you go ahead and you pick a community or you pick an audience and just encourage. And these are your final remarks. And then Martina, you do the same.
Oh gosh. I'm gonna start with teachers because I remember you called that out, and especially in my young author project, teachers are so helpful getting young people into our workshops. We call them our Ed Fellows, and they are like just the best cheerleaders for what Deep does, as well as identifying young people in their classroom that they think will benefit from our services. So, one, to teachers, I just have to say thank you and like bless you, because I know that you are putting in, like just the longest days, and it's really hard work that I think that you're doing a lot of the times. Julius talked about, what do you do when you feel like you're giving a young person all that you can? You've become their teacher, their social worker, their guidance counselor, all of these things. And then that, at 3:15 when the bell rings, the place that they're going is not going to show them that same love and respect that you are. I was a substitute teacher for a brief year when I was in graduate school. And so I just have the highest respect for what teachers do. And if I can offer any words of encouragement to teachers, is just that please know that the work you do is so, so important, and it goes so far beyond the test scores. I feel like every adult, maybe not every adult will, but I hope most adults can think back to their time in school and identify one person, a teacher who really changed their life. I can think of at least 3 teachers in high school who showed me what it was to be a writer, who showed me what it was to use my voice. And even if my grade in their class wasn't, the best shining A that mom was going to put on the refrigerator, they didn't let that change the way that they treated me. They still understood and like treated me as a human. And I think that part of your work is hard, but it's super important. And I'll pass it off to Martina.
Yes, I agree. I don't know what we would be as individuals without our teachers. Our teachers are a huge resource. Those guidance counselors in the school, the social workers, the principals. We have a huge thankfulness for our teachers, because even some of the things that we don't necessarily see, they see, and they're able to translate and figure out what's going on. The fact that we work hand in hand with them every day. But I'm so grateful for our teachers, and I just stand in applause for you all, because I think that you all are a wonderful source of resource. Not only do you work with your kids during school hours, but after school hours. And I think that we take for granted how much work it takes to be able to do that in the fullest extent. So I want to definitely commend you all for all the work that you do. And also, I want to answer Ms. Fulton, Tisha Fulton. So the narrative of we have to learn to ask for help. Um, I think that's the interesting concept. I feel like maybe it is possible to learn how to ask for help, but I feel like also sometimes we have to preference it as organizations sometimes of how can we best be able to advocate for your help, because I think for the most part you can ask for help, but I feel like people have feelings, sometimes emotions get involved, and sometimes you don't know how to ask for help. So it's even us reaching out and being better as organizations to see how we can help you without even you uttering a word, because sometimes we don't know, and I understand that it can sometimes be an emotional work to ask someone else for help. So I understand why things happen, but I do want to sit in that and just know that sometimes we also could be better about asking how we can best help you.
Marie?
I want to say thank you to Ariel, Martina, and Miko, because you all do a wonderful job. You all deal with the kids every day, as well as the teachers. I applaud the teachers because they have our children most of the day. So, they do a really, really big job. And I want to applaud the teachers as well. But when you take out your time to try to give to an individual, a child, especially a child who's lacking, feel like they're not loved. And, that's important when you give of yourself to somebody. And especially you don't know these little people, especially the ones that are being rebellious and who's bucking against everything that you're trying to do for them. And then you still show love. I think that's really good. I like that.
All
So
right.
that's
So,
Nico.
Kelly, Martina, Ariel, thank you for coming on tonight and sharing with us. We will definitely have you back sometime to give us some updates on what you're doing. To our audience, we thank you for riding with us, being faithful and committed, because our desire is to do whatever we can, both practically, but also principally, to help our young people. Join us December the 1st as we come out, OAA Savannah, to try to put what we're saying tonight in action. We love all of you for joining us. Share this with others so that they too can get in the village that we've been talking about. AB, thanks for giving us this opportunity. Julius Hall, thank you again for this platform. And as I always love to say, we may have started out wrong, but we can all finish strong. And that's what I love about this panel. We are now finishing strong. So ladies, good night. And I appreciate you again. See you next time. Good night.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. Thank
Bye.
you.